Hey there, and welcome to Ruck, Buttercup, the podcast that's all about real talk for military spouses and families. I'm Sabrina, and we're so glad you're here.
And I'm Ashley, and together we dive into the ups, the downs, and everything in between that comes with military life. From deployment tips to marriage conversations to PCS chaos, finding your identity and owning it, nothing is off limits.
And I'm Laura. Whether you're folding uniforms, packing boxes, managing the home front, solo, or just trying to make it through another long week, you're in the right place. Here on Ruck Up Buttercup, we share real stories, honest conversation, and practical support for military families.
We talk about the hard stuff, the hopeful stuff, and everything in between. Because military life is anything but one size fits all.
This is a space to feel seen, supported, and reminded that you're never alone in this journey.
So lace up those boots, lift your chin, and let's ruck up Buttercup. Military life doesn't define us. We rise in.
You can also hear us on Wreath Across America Radio on Women in Media Wednesdays at 11 p.m. See you there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ruck Up Buttercup. We are in the month of the military child, and it's such a special month for us here over at the podcast, as well as Deployed Love, but throughout our entire military community. We get to love on our babies a little extra hard this month, and our guest is just another amazing resource that does that as well. So today I have a special guest. She is a retired Navy veteran, a military spouse of over 20 years, and has over 2 decades of working in the nonprofit sector. But she's also the executive director for Our Military Kids. Welcome to the show, Kara.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So why don't we start off with talking a little bit about your journey as a veteran and a military spouse and how you came into working as the executive director for Our Military Kids.
Sure. Yeah. So I was in the Navy and then met my husband, and he also was in the Navy. So we journeyed together as a dual military couple for a bunch of years. And then I decided to get out and go into the Navy Reserve. And that was mainly because co-location was a little bit dicey. And it turned out to be a great decision for me. So I stayed in the Navy Reserve and ended up being mobilized after 9/11 with the Navy Seabees in Port Hueneme. And so my military kids were in kindergarten and first grade when that happened. And so the mission of Our Military Kids to support the National Guard and Reserve during deployment, as well as children who have a combat injured service member parent, it really is near and dear to my heart. During the time when I was in the Navy Reserve, we were stationed in Japan at one point, Yokosuka, and I started volunteering for a nonprofit that supported military families and veteran families, and then gradually worked my way into a job there. And so it's just been a wonderful kind of dual journey as a military spouse, a mom to military kids in the Navy Reserve, but then also supporting the community that I have been a part of.
I think that having an organization specifically that's supporting reserve and guard families is so important because we see so many things for active duty. It's much easier, and I'm quoting in the video if you're listening to this, to provide support to military kids who are at an installation. But when you have families who are spread out more, they don't get that same level of support. And we see it all the time here over Deployed Love. Do you have anything for guard? Do you have anything for reserve families? And we do, but our in-person events are at locations where we have volunteers. I actually had someone reach out the other day and was like, hey, how can I be a part of this? I'm a part of a reserve unit. And I'm like, are you in an area that has a lot of reserve families? We can 100% set up a location there. It's all going to be based on if you're going to have anyone come participate in this, but we can provide virtual support because we try to do our best, but virtual support and in-person support is not always the same. But I think, and you might be able to answer, this might have answered your question, but you can put your own words to it. What was your first what first connected your heart to the mission of our military kids? I think you already said it, like your kids were military kids. And so was that your deciding factor, or was there something else that kind of drew you into the mission in the program?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think my heart has become even more attached to the mission as I have been working in this space with the National Guard and Reserve. Uh, it's just a very special population of patriots because they are doing their day job and then on the weekends, and they are going to training during the summer. Their kids very often don't even identify as military children. And then
Yeah.
they're off deployed for over 365 days, which we very typically see. And I just think it takes a very special person to invest in their military career while trying to do that parallel investment in their civilian career. And all the people I have met have just been so phenomenal, and their kids are phenomenal. And we're so grateful that we're able to support them. We were founded as a result of 9/11 because that was the first time really that the National Guard specifically was deploying in full force, and we've been doing that for 20 years. And in fact, I don't know if you saw on our website, but we just made our 100,000th activity award. So we
That's
have given out
amazing.
$36 million in all 50 states and 4 territories. And to your point earlier, we like to say we've served a kid in every zip code because you're right. It's a very dispersed population.
It is. And one of my volunteers, actually, Amy, she was one of the readers to like help select this year's, like through the bios and stuff. And she's just gushed over all the phenomenal kids that she got to like just read and get to learn and experience. And it's so fun to hear their stories and how some of those kids who don't identify as military kids, because it is a very different lifestyle. It is a very different, like their life is disrupted when their parent leaves for a deployment or on guard or something like that. But it may not necessarily the same as like constant like field rotations and things like that as like active duty or like long hours. I know my husband's journey is like right now he's in a job where I'm like, oh, he's sitting at a desk, like he's working these hours, but then he's was also an ROTC instructor last year for the last 2 years prior to that. So he was working at a university, but then the 3 years before that, he rapidly deployed 3 times with a 2-hour notice. So it's chaotic no matter where you are. But guards and our reserve families have that very unique change in it because it is like the best of both worlds. Like we're in that Hannah Montana phase. I'm throwing that in there. She like is very big with the kids right now with her comeback, and it's almost like this is one life and this is one life, but then when you get to merge them together and you get to love on the rest of the family members, it's so nice. And I love that there's a program specifically just for those families because they do tend to get lost in the sea of all the other kids that are out there. I remember when I first saw the program go out, and we'll talk a little bit about the program specifically here in a few minutes. But I remember seeing so many families going like, how can I nominate my kid? And oh, you have to be a reserve or a guard family or a family who has a service member who was injured. And I remember seeing someone's comment going, what about our kids? I'm like, but there's so many programs out there for our kids. Like these kids this program was made specifically for them because there was a need. And I always say that programs are out there because there was a need that was saw and needed to be filled. So diving into like how, before we move on to a few more questions, like how did your own experience mobilize the shape of how you see these military kids, and how did that play a role, your service as a service member or as a mom? Has that played a role into what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a combination because I think the whole idea from just as a child, my parents were very, I wouldn't say adamant, but they were very encouraging in terms of making sure that we played the piano, that we had that we played sports and that we were involved in our community and all that kind of thing. And the whole idea of activities, whatever they may be, ranging from piano all the way to volleyball, which was my sport. I think that what's really important about our mission is not only are we serving these National Guard and Reserve families, but it's at a time when stress is high and resources may not be available because essentially the person at home taking care of the kids is a single parent. The whole idea that we're able to serve this unique population and relieve their stress through activity awards is just something that, it's something that I've become more and more passionate about as I continue in this role.
I love that. That was one of my parents' things that they were very not strict on, but you have to do some form of activity. We don't care what it is, but you should be in some activity throughout the year. So if in the spring, fall, summer, whatever the case may be, but this is something that's important. It's going to keep you busy, things like that. And so I remember getting to try all the different sports when I was younger and trying to find my niche. And then I'm a twin, so it was also this weird competition for me and my sister to find our own identity, because when we were younger, we always did the same things. And so it was really fun to see us grow into our own individuals through those activities. That's really where we just split off and realized my sister was a soccer and a swim team girl, and I was track and dance and softball. And so it was so important and so profound. And I think for military kids specifically, it gives them that opportunity or a safe place to meet like-minded individuals who they can make a connection and a community with. Those are where I met some of my dearest friends. I remember one of my very best friends to this day from high school was from theater, and I would have never connected with her if we weren't in theater together. And it's because of those things that can make time from your parent gone to being busy and enjoyable and figuring things out to not that way. So I love that. And so let's first go back just a teeny tiny bit to talking about the reality of military kids' life and how that affects them. And you talked about this as a very high stress time frame, right? Kids are really resilient. We talk about that. They're adaptable. They can figure things out, but they're those not always necessarily silent. They need some type of outlet to let out their frustrations, their emotions. And yet they often carry a lot of different emotions during deployments. And how, I guess you already answered this, because we were talking about how this program is set in place for these activities, and why are they so important during this time with all the emotional baggage that our kids carry? Like you said, sports, music, art, anything like that. So why did our military kids say this is important and we want to focus on it?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Our founders were absolutely just brilliant from the very get-go, how they created the model for our military kids. And one thing we also do is we do an annual survey, and we're focused, to your point about the kids. We can tell you that 3 out of 4 kids are super stressed during this deployment, which is a very high number. And what we don't want is for it to impact their success in school. And so we look at what are the activities bringing to these kids to reduce their stress level, which we know is happening. And to your point about your theater friend, these kids are able to make friends. They also find mentors in their coaches and teachers and that kind of thing. And and it could be just the physical exertion that's part of the stress reducer, but it also could just be the enjoyment, like theater or music. There was one of our beneficiary kids who just said, the 10 minutes I'm at the piano every day is one of the best parts of my day. And we hear story after story. I was just talking to a mom who it's actually a dual military family, and they have 6 kids, and they found gymnastics through our military kids, and just so exciting. literally the mom was said, I didn't even know how to spell gymnastics. And now her kids are absolutely excelling at a national level. And it doesn't always have to be that level of success. It can be just the 10 minutes a day at the piano, but it's
Yeah.
all important.
Yeah, as a military kid, so I was a military kid. My dad served, and I remember I was in middle school when 9/11 happened,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were overseas, and my dad was one of the very first ones to deploy when we sent service members over, and he was there for 18 months. Like, he was there, this is when they were back doing longer than a year deployments. He was there for 18 months. I
Yes.
think he was home for a couple months and then went back for a few months. But I remember, so my dad and I bonded over like baseball, softball. And so I remember like during this time frame going, okay, I'm going to put all I can into showing him how well I'm doing. And it was so cool because he got to come home and my team took European championship that year that he got to come home.
Oh,
And it was just so exciting it's so funny because I found a photo of that the other day and of us like at launch stool winning the championship. And it was really cool because like I probably would have never picked softball for myself.
yeah.
Again, when you're a military kid and you're overseas and stuff like that, you just take what's there. They didn't have volleyball or things like that. So it was very limited to what I could do in the spring sports. And I already was doing running in the fall and I didn't want to do running in the spring too. So I was like, okay, I'll try softball. Dad likes to play, like we like to throw the baseball around in the yard. And it was just such a really cool way for us to connect when he was home, like just go out in the yard and throw the ball back and forth and see his excitement. And then just getting to do all those things and get to tell him like how we were doing in the tournaments and what positions I was playing now and how I was trying different positions and different things like that. And it was just a really cool way for us to connect at that time frame in letters because again back then we didn't have like social media and things like that. Communication was through letters and those quick occasional phone calls. But I know as a military kid who has experienced that myself, it is so important to have some form of outlets. And sometimes you just have to take what's handed to you, like what's available to you. But getting to try new things is so fun. I think my kids are at the age now where I'm just like, okay, guys, listen, mom's rule, because I told my husband, I was like, this will be my rule. Like they have to do some form of activity. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's karate or I don't care what it is, if it's music, whatever it is, but they have to do one form of activity because I knew growing up that was so profound in how I survived this lifestyle. And then getting to try new things. And I was like, and I want them to try new things too, because like some things that worked for me when I was younger were not as enjoyable to me as a teenager and vice versa. So I think it's so important and we really enjoy it. So on that, are there any other stories that have stuck with you from families that you've helped, like other than the one that you were just talking to about gymnastics?
Oh, yeah. I am so glad you made that point about the connection to your service member parent during that deployment because that reigns true even now.
Yeah.
That's a really important point because
My
those
dad loves my
conversations.
podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, even now,
It,
it's still one of those things that we're still doing as adults. Like we're still trying to connect and things like that. And so I love my dad. They listen to the podcast today, and I'm like, ooh, oh, okay, cool. That's great. I love that you're supporting me, but maybe don't listen to this episode.
yeah, it's funny because we actually do look, to your point, we do look at in our surveys how many kids continue with the same activity because routine is really important as well during a stressful time, and how many kids decide to pick an activity that they're just trying something new. And in fact, yeah, there was I remember one mom saying that they had no idea why their daughter picked ballet because that just came out of left field, and it was something that she, like just like you described, was able to talk to her dad about, and send pictures. And even in today's day and age, talking on the phone is hard for kids because of all the social media. So it literally does give the parent and child something to talk about. And it also raises another really important point, which is we, in addition to the child's well-being, we look and measure the service members' morale, which is through the roof because of these activities in terms of just high morale. And then we look at the sense of community, because these kids are building their own community outside of the military in most cases, as we've already discussed. And then just the overall family well-being. Everything you just touched on really illustrates that. We had two kids Isaiah and Asia, and they took cooking classes with their activity awards. And in terms of their feedback was, Mom, we had no idea how much time you spend on your feet while you're cooking. And then Asia was so excited because we got to make macaroni and cheese from scratch. We'll be able to help you during this time by preparing meals. And we had,
that's sweet.
Yeah, give me just a second. I need to plug in my computer.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah. So, and there are so many stories, but I really love that you experienced that connection with your dad. And I'm going to focus more on that because that is really cool.
And again, I think it's important. And I think that's like such a fun, and that's how the kids are connecting with their service members. And I think that's how our service members were connecting with their kids, because it gives them like I know baseball. I can talk to my kid about baseball. I know that. But if they've been gone for a period of time, I know for my husband's only been gone for 6 months. But 6 months is still a long time. 6 months is a huge time frame from our kids when they're growing and learning new things. And everything that my kids loved when my husband was home, it's completely new things. So I see my husband's eyes glaze over sometimes, like when my daughter's talking to him about K-pop Demon Hunter this or dance this. But he's such a champ. That sounds great, baby. I love that. And like, you have no idea what she's talking about, do you? He's not a thing. But having that connection of a sport, hey, Dad, my husband never played basketball, but he knows what basketball is, and they can talk about it. Or, hey, we tried this today. It was super fun. And so I think that gives them what's the word I'm trying to look for? Not a safe space, but a very like neutral ground of maybe not messing something up of, oh my God, can't believe you don't know what that is, Dad. It makes everyone feel like they can connect and share stories, even if it's stories from their kid. Like my kids love hearing stories about us when we were kids. It's so funny. Like they'll ask, like my daughter was asking the other day, Mom, remember when you did this? And I'm like, how do you remember that? I told you that 4 years ago when you were like 4. Like, how do you remember that story? But it's great because like they're listening and they're learning and they're seeing things that we've did and how they can bring that into their scope and how they coped with things. And I'm a firm believer of leading by example. So my kids we have a huge event on Saturday. I'll say this. We have a huge event for Deployed Love. Our Deployed Love teams across the country do our Purple Up events in April. So each one of our branches will have a different type of event. Mine here at Fort Benning is on Saturday. So if you're listening, you're at Fort Benning. Actually, this will come out after that, so scratch that. But we have our event, and my kids have both said over the week, Mom, we can't wait to help you. We can't wait to help you put on this event and help other kids have a really good time. And I'm like, oh, my heart. Like they're 11 and 8, and them just saying that it's important to support military kids is so wonderful, and having different programs. So let's dive into what the mission of our military kids. Let's get into exactly, like we talked a little bit about like how you came a part of it, but let's dive into it. Our military kids provides extracurricular activity grants for children ages 1 through 18 whose parents are either a deployed National Guard, deployed reserve family, or veterans receiving treatment for combat-related injuries. What does these grants allow the kids to do?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was like, so what are the grants What does the grant allow these kids to participate
Okay.
in?
Okay. Yes. This is a perfect segue because we talked about the kids being in every zip code. We're a really small team of 8 people. And so what we do is empower the kids to find the activity in the communities where they live. So that's number one. So that's how
Which
you
I
end
think is
up with
phenomenal. It gives them that, like,
yeah.
it gives them that
It is.
fun of like, I can research and find this, and this is what I want to do. I love that.
Yeah, we have everything from mommy and me swimming to driver's ed to I'm trying to think. Oh, yo-yo, and actually Grayson is a national champion in yo-yo at his year of 11 years old.
That's I love that.
I know. So the process is this: a parent that has the eligible children would go onto our website and apply online. And we know that there are a lot of processes that are complicated, and ours isn't perfect, but it is something that our parents tell us is easier than most processes. And so if the grant or application comes in today, then it will be processed this week if everything's in order. And then next week it'll go out the door. So let me just show you. We have
So they can apply
we
for
won't
they can apply for this throughout the year. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So as soon as the parent has orders, in the case of a deployed National Guard or Reserve kid, then the either parent can apply for the child. And
They're about to be busy.
yeah, exactly. And it really is based on the creativity of the kids. And as we talked about it could be to continue a routine or to start something new. But what we really want to do is we want to say to these kids and teenagers and all our military kids, we want to say, we see you. And this is a really difficult time because your parent is serving in the military. And we want you to know that it's because of your parent's service that you are receiving this top secret package.
Oh, I love
Which,
that.
isn't it fun? And we just redid this. So it has activity camo. I don't know if you can really discern that or not in the light.
I'm
Yeah,
hoping
but
it'll come through better on the end, but it's okay. Maybe send me a picture and we can post it.
okay, sure. So anyway, it has a certificate with the child's name on it. It has a letter from me saying, enjoy your activity. This is really cool. And then it has dog tags, an Our Military Kids patch. And then it has the envelope in it with a letter to the activity provider and the check to pay for the activity. So the child can actually take the check to the activity provider and pay for their activity through Our Military Kids. So it's a really cool process. And then we have volunteers, volunteers who make thank you cards. And so the child will also get a thank you card from a real live person, which is cool. And then another thing that our founders came up with, which I just think is fantastic, is there are thank you postcards. And so whoever funded the activity gets a handwritten thank you card from the child who
Oh,
received
I love
the
that.
activity. I know it's a perfect full circle situation.
Yeah,
But
that's
anyway,
really great.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then,
So
so
go ahead.
what impact have you seen from these activity awards? So, what has been some of the feedback you've gotten from the families who have been awarded this for their kids, and like how has it made a difference in their time with their service member gone?
Yeah, the impact is across the board. We are so fortunate. We get photos and videos and thank you notes literally almost every day, Ashley. It's incredible how grateful our families are. And yeah, the pictures, oh my gosh, it's impossible to describe how fulfilling it is to know that this simple act of kindness is really impacting families during a very stressful time. And
Yeah.
the things we hear are, my kids are making friends, my kids, all the things that we've talked about. And something that isn't necessarily always talked about, but is a fact, is that in the vast majority of the cases, the family would not have been able to pay for the activity were it not
Yeah.
for our military kids. And so we get a lot of thank yous for the financial assistance because budgets are tight and
Mhm.
extracurriculars are the first thing to go in many cases. And so we're glad we're able to step in and make sure that we're able to provide this stress relief during a really stressful time.
Yeah. I love that. I love that families can apply for this no matter what time of year it is. Unlike some other programs where it's by this date for the whole year, and you're like, but I don't even know if my service member is going to be deployed or not. Especially in today's time, I feel like we have all those rapid deployments and rapid activations. And that's kind of was like how I was joking. I was like, you guys are going to be really busy here probably soon with requests because there's so many people who are deploying. And it is so important to have these kids. I want to know, and I don't know if you have the answer to this. I'm hoping you do. What has been one of the craziest, not crazy, because I feel like any extracurricular activity is not crazy, but what has been one of the most unique classes or activities that have been a request for?
I would have to say Japanese sword fighting.
I I love that so much.
Yeah, the creativity is really quite great. We've had kids do 4-H where they've raised an animal with their activity award, or we've also had bull riding, barrel
Oh,
racing. Yeah, it really is, it runs the gamut. I would say about 60% are sports or sports
mhm.
related, maybe even a little bit more. But yeah, driver's ed is another one that's becoming very popular, mainly because we're
Yeah,
promoting that as an
but
opportunity for
you
the
don't
older
even think
kids.
about
And
it, like, it's actually pretty expensive to
it
do
is,
driver's ed, and so that's really great that that can be included because I know some families who are just like, "I don't know if we can afford this," but they have to take driver's ed in order to get
right.
their permit and stuff, and so I'm just like I'm sitting there going, "That's how much it costs? Is this what I have to look forward to when my kids get older?" But that's great that is included, so and I think that's wonderful that having these options because and I don't I feel so woefully like unprepared or not very knowledgeable about the reserves and National Guard families because it is for me I only run into them every once in a while. Oh, they're here on a specific training, and they're back. Or I did run into when we were stationed in Virginia on ROTC orders. There was a guard spouse who came to a book club I started, but unfortunately, she ended up just was really stressed and she didn't come. And I kept on trying to be like, hey, like community is really important, and I'm here. I was like, I'm not a reserve spouse, but like I am an active duty spouse, and I understand your husband's gone, you have kids, you're solo parenting. Like I'm here to be like an anchor point for you if you need it. And I saw how like being so remote and so out of a community that could understand because as much as our civilian counterparts try to understand what we go through, no one's ever going to understand what you're going through unless they've been through it. And even then, our journeys are different. That is our theme of the year. No one journey is the same. And so having that connection is so important. So I'm going to assume that's why it's important to reach the Guard and Reserve families for you guys. Like it is such a different playing field for them in terms of support and community, but they're also potentially living in like higher like cost living areas as well. And so having that opportunity to be able to give funds to the kids can do things is really important. So you have another part of your program though that happens. This one happens yearly though, correct?
Correct.
So you have a Courageous Kids contest. Can you talk to us about what that is?
Sure. So we had our 6th annual Courageous Kids contest this year, and there were over 550 exceptional children
Wow.
and teens who were nominated.
That's
Unbelievable.
phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
We set out this year to have 6 winners in the combat injured program side and 6 in on the deployed side, and it was so phenomenal. We ended up with 26 winners. because the stories were just fantastic. And the background on it is that in 2021, we were reflecting back on the pandemic and what kids went through with the pandemic and having a parent deployed or recovering from combat injuries, and thought we really needed to recognize them. And so that's how the contest started. So for kids who had a parent deployed in 2020, and here we are in 2026, and it's become its own thing in that not only are coaches, parents, aunts, uncles, teachers nominating the kids, and some of the kids get multiple nominations too, but the stories that we're getting are so great. And we've come up with a method. We have an outreach committee that promotes the contest and really makes sure that we get those nominations going. And then we have a review committee that reviews the nominations. And we have I have some very talented teammates who were able to go through, and we actually make the nominations anonymous, so they don't know the name of the child. They just know, so it's just child one, child two, so it's a very great system, and we basically rate them from star to supernova because they're all really great, and that's a tough thing to do, those nominations. Yeah,
it is tough. I'm getting ready. I'm reading through ours right now. We do that every year too. We do where the nominated kid, and I have to pick mine for tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, how do I just pick one? Like, it's so hard because you're like, every child deserves the recognition that they have. And I think like the fact that you had over 500 nominations states and shows just how truly amazing military kids are and what they're doing that is completely different from their counterparts in the community because of all the other things that they have on their plate that another kid may not have. Not saying that other kids probably don't have stressors in their life, but having the stressor of a parent constantly coming and going and leaving, and the stress of especially older kids. I remember when I first realized, oh, my dad's in harm's way. Like, I remember that click of, oh, dad's gone. No big deal. My dad was a ranger. So my dad was constantly, like, when he was gone, was in harm's way. But as a kid, I didn't really realize it until after 9/11, my dad went to Iraq, and I was like, oh. And then even then I was like, oh, my dad's fine. My dad is a soldier. And I remember having that same thought, like when my husband left. My husband and my dad deployed at the same time for one of my dad's last deployments. And I remember just being so worried about my husband. And then I'm like, no, my dad's fine. He's living a cush life. Like, he's living that. But then I'm like, but no, he could still be like, he's still going out and doing different things. And so I think having that many kids nominated to say, hey, they are doing phenomenal things in the community. And I'm sure they're doing things like advocacy and all these other things that are setting them apart in these different programs. And I love to see where military kids go. I love looking back at all my friends that I had as a military community and seeing where they are today in our late 30s to be like, I knew she would get there, or I knew he would get there. And so it's really the fact that there is programs out there where you can nominate kids for their recognition, because a lot of these kids go unrecognized. They just do it because that's what they love to do, or that's what they have to do. So it's really amazing that there's a program out there that just does that. So what makes a courageous kid in your guys' eyes? What makes those 27 stand out from the 500 plus kids that were nominated?
Yeah, what we're looking for is, all the kids are great, but who are the kids taking it to the next level in terms of excuse me, I'm on a podcast. Thank you. I'll leave it on the table. Thank you. I should have closed my door. So what are these kids doing in their homes, in their communities, in their schools to really stand out. And we had kids who had their own, starting their own businesses, or were mentoring and coaching kids in the sport that they were excelling in, that they were being extra helpful at home, especially in our combat injured program. There's a statistic that is absolutely hard to believe, but there are 5.5 million military caregiving kids out there. And
That's
what
a
they are
really big
doing for
number.
their parents is remarkable. And so we actually set aside awards for those caregiving kids, the Hidden Helper Hero Award, as the ones who stood out as being particularly invested in the care of their combat injured service member parent. Yeah, it's across the board, but in general, how are they taking it to the next level during an extremely stressful time? And yeah, these kids really rocked it.
I feel like military kids can just knock it out of the park. I think we, as parents and in the community, are teaching our kids that, and if we continue to teach them this, that they're going to go to the moon. Like, we're teaching them that they can do whatever they put their minds to. If you want to start a business,
Yes.
let me help you. If you want to be an Olympic athlete, okay, how can we get you there? And I think that having those conversations, I always joke, I have a friend who her kids are all in traveling sports, and which is a lot of time and a lot of commitment, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. And this is their passion, this is what they love, and they're phenomenal at it, and I want to grow and nurture that. And I was like, yes, I agree, but I was like, you, like, have you slept this week? So I think that's also showing kids that, like, sometimes we have to make other sacrifices in other areas to have what we want in our dreams. And I don't think other kids necessarily have that example set for them. And I think military kids have that over and over again because they see their service member making those sacrifices and leaving and doing and getting the job done. And so seeing kids take that and put it towards an activity or a sport or even just their education, and just being like, I want a 4.0 and I'm going to go hard and get full ride scholarships so my parents don't have to worry about it or anything like that. But at the same time, I feel like that mental load can be a lot too. Like, I remember having those thoughts of, okay, I have to be really good at a sport or really good at this activity, so maybe I can get a scholarship. I unfortunately moved too much to be even noticed by anybody for any of that type of thing. But I still enjoy doing all those things. So I think it's just a phenomenal program, and you have all these kids. Is there anything specifically that because right now you guys have selected your winners, and for the whole month of April, we're getting to learn about their stories, correct? Over on your guys'
Yes.
social. Are we seeing just like their stories shared in bios, or like, how do we get to know these kids a little bit better?
That's a great question. So we are posting on all social media channels the stories, and each child gets their day in April to have their story told. And so if you follow us at Our Military Kids on all, we have the same handle for all of our social media channels, you'll get to learn about these kids. And I think said the 17th of April is the official Purple Up Day. Is that right?
I think it's different everywhere. Like, every state has a different day. That's
Oh,
one of
okay.
my biggest things. Like, I thought it was the 10th, but then I re-looked it up the other day and I was like, oh, it's the 15th, but then I've seen the 17th and I've seen the 23rd. So I'm like, you know what? That's why we just do it the whole month long, y'all. And we just love on everybody through the whole month.
Yeah. On Purple Up Day, mid-April, we're going to publish press release with all of the winners and a link to their stories. And we're going to have, it's really going to give the full picture. But like I said, each child gets their day in the bright light, and we really would appreciate everybody giving them extra love during.
Like, just go over and say, wow, that's amazing, congratulations, or you were doing phenomenal work, because I think that can also spark so much more. Like, if I had that as a kid, and not saying I didn't, but if I had that as a kid from just complete strangers in the world, that's not, again, social media wasn't around when I was middle school, high school, having that and being like, okay, I can keep going, or I can keep doing this, or I can do this even better, and I can keep going. And I'm always like, I love support. If I find out someone is a military kid or a military spouse and they're doing something where like they need cheering on, I'm like, go, let's go. You are doing a phenomenal job. And I think encouragement, especially in a time where people can be so negative, it can really make a big difference. And it can take someone going from, I think I'm going to give up on this, to, no, I'm going to make this my career, or I'm going to do this. And you never know what can come of it. And I think that's a really great story to be like, but also the kids need recognition. I just think that's so important. So we learned about the babies. We've learned about their recognition and things like that. So let's make sure that we go give extra love this month, and we'll make sure to share it on all of our pages as well. But I think we answered all of our questions that I had for you today. So as we're ready to close out, actually, no, I have one more question. And this may not even, we may have touched on it, but what do people often overlook about military kids? Is there something specific that you feel is often overlooked?
I'm gonna answer with what yeah. So I think what you were talking about earlier about encouraging your kids to volunteer, and when that's you want them, you're modeling that life of service. And so I think you skipped over like the absolute importance of the military spouse, because while your service member is serving, you also are, and you're also modeling all of these traits that are a life of service. And I can tell you a personal story because my daughter, the one who was in first grade on 9/11, has volunteered at three different events for our military kids. She lives in Boston, and then she actually flew to San Antonio for one of the events that we were doing with the National Park Trust. That modeling that both the service member and the military spouse are doing. It resonates with these kids, and these kids are truly amazing. What is overlooked specifically? I think for the Guard and Reserve kids, it's the fact that people, they're not in a military community that recognizes them for the sacrifices that they're making. And as I said, almost at the very beginning of the podcast, the whole idea that they don't even recognize themselves as military kids. And so that's why it's so important to be able to get this top secret package in the mail. How many times do you get mail? So I think what's overlooked is the idea that these kids are continuously rising above, striving for excellence, as you said, about your own journey as a military kid. And it's fair and appropriate to recognize them and acknowledge the challenges during a deployment or combat recovery care. And I don't know if thanking them is the right thing, but just having a deeper understanding or wanting to understand. And again, for Guard and Reserve kids, people talk about active duty, and my big thing is currently serving. If you're currently serving, your family is making the sacrifices that are helping our country, and that's important.
I agree. I think that is a phenomenal way to end the podcast. But one more question, because we always ask this for anybody who comes on that is a military spouse, veteran. If you have one key of advice that you could share with, I would say, let's focus on Guard and Reserve families. I'm sure this can go for other families as well, but specifically for those Guards and Reserve families who are listening, what is one piece of advice that you would give them to navigate this lifestyle?
One piece of advice.
It can be more than one.
I guess I guess that the National Guard and Reserve, it's again the way I started, is a phenomenal organization, and together they're referred to as the reserve component. And And their families are phenomenal, and there are not a lot of resources out there.
Mm-hmm.
But there are organizations like Our Military Kids who are advocating for the National Guard and Reserve. We're in circles with the active duty service members and nonprofits, and we're saying, okay, how are you helping the National Guard and Reserve at nonprofit X, Y, or Z? I guess I would say, as Our Military Kids and the Guard and Reserve themselves are trying to elevate the needs of military families, especially during deployment, look for those resources or come to us to point you to other resources. And don't be afraid to ask for help during this time, because it's not something that that you've maybe navigated through your entire marriage or career or and all of that. So yeah, I think asking for help, be resource seeking, because
Yeah.
one thing will lead to another and it will improve your family's quality of life.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think what I want to add to that is sometimes people are like, I'm just tired of having to look, but resources like Deployed Love, we try to service every branch, but we only can do so much when we don't even know. I'm so happy
Right.
that I have a guard and a reserve spouse on my staff now. And I'm like, oh, finally, I have like inside knowledge of how things work, because I, as an active duty Army spouse and who was raised Army, I know Army. I don't know the other branches. And so if you are someone who's listening and you're like, I really want to be able to help reserve families or that reserve component more, find an organization to assist with. Come over to Deployed Love and help us figure out how we can make our programs more accessible to those families, because we can't fix something that we don't know is a big struggle. Like, I know the disconnect for families for those side of the programs is a huge struggle, but how can we bridge that gap? And so I think if you're someone who is willing to even just come in as like, hey, like these are the things that our families that we've talked to and our family specifically are struggling with, how can we bridge this and how can we do that? That's what we are all about here at the podcast. That's why the podcast started. We want to make sure we can help bridge those gaps for those families who don't know about resources. And you can clearly see that we are in our 6th season and we've been doing this for 6 years, and
Yeah.
I have no intentions of stopping, guys. And as well as over at Deployed Love, like we want to make sure that we support, like we have our virtual community, which I know everyone was really burnt out on virtual everything, but we have our virtual community where we're bringing in virtual events again. And we have our events. I just added 2 installations to our roundup. So make sure you're following and make sure you guys are connecting. But as well as like our network here, specifically my network with being the Fort Bragg military, or not Fort Bragg, I always say Fort Bragg, Fort Benning Military Spouse of the Year, and being one of the Army finalists, having that network of military spouses whose sole mission in life is to make sure families are equipped with anything and everything to navigate this as smoothly as possible. There are people out there who are going to help you, and there are guard spouses and reserve spouses that I can be like, hey, I don't know this, but do you know a resource for this? So make sure you are plugging in and connecting with other resources, because there are individuals on the team who are going to be like, hey, that's not what we do, but we know a great person for you to talk to. Let's connect.
Yeah.
And we're out here to do that. So make sure you're sharing. Even if you listen to this podcast, be like, hey, like this was a great resource, you guys should check it out. Make sure you're sharing that information and not just keeping it tucked in for yourself, because sharing is caring, friends. And we want to make sure everyone knows about these programs. I keep saying it. We learn about a new program every single time we hit this record button. And it's just been such a phenomenal time to share these stories. So thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing
you. Absolutely.
the program, your story. It's been such a pleasure. And before we dive off, is there any last minute comments you would like to make?
No, I think you tied it up beautifully, and I really truly appreciate your time and your initiative. It's really remarkable what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you. I love how our programs mesh with every other program. We're here to uplift, support, and love on military kids. Here's mine, one of mine.
Military
And
kid right there.
there she is. So having a program that I feel helps glue other programs together is something that just brings such joy to my life, even on the most chaotic and stressful time frames. I'm like, this is just so important that we can connect. And I love getting to support other programs because they're all there. They're all there for a phenomenal reason. They're not just there because someone woke up one day and was just like, I want to do this. Not like the podcast, because that's literally how this came around. We're going to do that. I love sharing that because I'm just like, this literally just sprouted from we should do this. We should totally do this. And yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in today. And we will catch you guys again later this week, or later in a couple of weeks, with another great episode. And we always like to say here, we have your back. We're here to share your stories. And it's time to just ruck up, Buttercup. Okay.